You are listening to Diasporic Music with on Black Power 96 with Melinda Francis, Norman Richmond, and on the line with Dr. Gerald Horne. And I, in front of me, have a copy of The Rise and Fall of the Associated Negro Press, Claude Burnett's Pan-African News, and the Jim Crow, Paradox. And how are you doing today, sir?
Hey, it's all good. I hope you were able to review that book.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In terms of the jazz thing, yeah. I it's no problem. I got it together.
Right on.
I'm going to. I'll be sending it to Mary in Bayview.
Right on.
So I guess the first question I wanted to mess with you about is I was speaking to our mutual comrade Walter Turner. He wanted to get your takes on the NBA playoffs.
Well, I understand your homeboy Scotty Barnes of the Toronto Raptors is Rookie of the Year.
Correct.
And also understand that your Toronto Raptors are not doing very well against the Philadelphia 76ers and Cameroonian Joel Embiid, who despite a hurt thumb has been hammering the Raptors. I have to say that
they stopped him yesterday though.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens for the rest of the series. Like many, I'm disappointed with the Brooklyn Nets. I think that what has happened is the Boston Celtics have come together as a team in the last few months. And of course, their coach is of African descent. With regard to the Golden State Warriors, who are playing better than anybody, they have a new hot star in Jordan Poole, which may bring them over the top. Of course, the Phoenix Suns have lost Devin Booker for a few weeks, but Chris Paul, the point guard, has stepped up tremendously. And I expect Miami to eliminate Atlanta sooner rather than later, just as I expect Dallas to eliminate the Utah Jazz sooner rather than later.
So in terms of the continental Africans, who has the most players in the NBA? How does Cameroon stand up? They got Siakam of Toronto Raptor. He's also from Cameroon as well.
Well, I'm not really sure. I mean, of course, Giannis of the Milwaukee Bucks, who I expect to do well against Chicago, he has Nigerian roots, although he apparently grew up in Greece. And Serge Ibaka has roots in RC as opposed to the DRC, that is to say, Republic of Congo. But I can't really tell you which team has the most continental African players.
All right, Melinda, you want to kick everything off?
Yeah, I think we should just get into the French elections.
Well, the latest report is, and this is really from only a half hour ago, that President Macron has triumphed over right-wing candidate Marine Le Pen, 57-43, which is a reduction of his point spread 5 years ago. Of course, now he has a record to run on. 5 years ago, he was a new shiny toy. But all is not lost, because, spread the word, there are parliamentary elections in France in June. Given the fact that in the first round of the presidential elections 2 weeks ago, the candidates of the left, led by Mr. Mélenchon, actually won more than 50%, except it was divided amongst Greens, Socialists, Communists, and etc. If the left can get together for the parliamentary elections in June, a few weeks from now, there is a possibility, and I underline possibility, that Mélenchon could emerge as the new prime minister of France, which would have monumental consequence if that happens. And once again, I'm disappointed with our friends in the United States, who rarely compare the strength of conservatism in this country with its peer nations such as France, where we're just talking about a Marxist being prime minister as of June, or even Canada. I know you all don't like me to compare Canada positively to the United States, but I'm going to do it anyway, where you have the New Democratic Party, which has just broken an agreement that adds a dental plan to the single-payer healthcare plan. In the United States, of course, we can only dream about that sort of thing. You would have thought that in the United States, it would have caused people to do an agonizing reappraisal of the history of this country, which, by the way, if any of you have time, on this Tuesday, I'm giving a lecture virtually at the University of Illinois, Chicago, providing a sweeping reinterpretation of U.S. history. That'll be 4 o'clock Central, 5 o'clock Pacific on Tuesday. And then on Thursday, I'll be leading a seminar about some of my published writings at the same place, University of Illinois, Chicago. That's 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. So you can register in advance if you want to be part of that discussion.
And you are listening to Diasporic Music with Dr. Gerald Horne on the line with Melinda Francis and myself. Could you talk about the history of the French left? I understand many people have said the French Communist Party was way, way, way behind on the colonial question, in particular on the question of Africa. Is that true or untrue?
It's not true to the best of my knowledge. I think what happened is that you had a number of African leaders like Houphouët-Boigny of Côte d'Ivoire, founding father of Côte d'Ivoire, who affiliated with the left and then became neo-colonialists. And then I think their neo-colonialism was then imputed to the left. But then you had Ousmane Sembène Ousmane, the leading African filmmaker of Senegal, who,
yes, sir,
of course, was affiliated with the left, actually studied film in Moscow. So I think that's something of an overstatement. But I will say that the French Communist Party has suffered grievously as a result of the collapse of the socialist count. And I think that's true for left-wing forces generally worldwide.
There's a book by the brother's name. His last name is Thompson, Pan-Africanism. I forgot. It was a required reading from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and they talked about the fact that the Cameroon was way, way ahead of the other countries, but the French wiped out at least 2, maybe 3 central committees, and that Cameroon was set to be the one of the first countries, if not the first independent country on the African continent. But the repression from the French was so, it was vicious. That is true, of course. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, look, it's probably true that at one point, maybe half of Africa was under the French flag. That bespeaks the toxic French influence. And in fact, on KPFK, the program Freedom Now, I'll be hosting a scholar, actually from Canada. I can't remember his name right now, Campbell. He teaches at McGill, who's a specialist on so-called French Africa, and particularly the Indian Ocean nations like Madagascar, Reunion, for example, the Comoros.
Right.
And one of the things I'm going to ask him about is one of the most profound and significant massacres in the history of the world, certainly of Africa, when in 1947, French troops massacred about 100,000 Madagascar activists, just decapitated the movement in one fell swoop. And then people wonder why today Madagascar is suffering under poverty, under climate change, and all the rest. So, on the other hand, if you look at Mauritius, Mauritius, the archipelago in the middle of the Indian Ocean that is part of the African Union, it's one of the so-called success stories of Africa. Of course, it's a former French colony. And I think I've told the story on this program before, how the confused ideologues in the Reagan administration, they wanted to overthrow the government of Mauritius, but they confused it with Mauritania on the Atlantic coast. And so they almost overthrew their ally in Mauritania because they couldn't tell the difference between Mauritania and Mauritius. That's the kind of incompetence that governs this declining empire.
Well, I don't know. Did I cut you off, sir? I didn't want to. I remember, I never will forget this as long as I live. I had just come to Canada, and I was walking down the street, Young and Bloor, for people. That's like the center of Toronto. I'm walking past the restaurant, and I look at this human being, and I couldn't figure out where this gentleman came from. When I looked at this guy, I saw Africa, Asia, Europe. I saw everything. And being the kind of obnoxious person that I can be, I walked up to the guy and said, "Man, where are you from?" And he told me he was from Madagascar. And we had a nice, conversation. But I guess that's because of the Madagascar that's what Thomas Sankara became learned about Marxism. But Madagascar, he probably had Europe, Africa, Asia, everything running through his veins. Am I correct in saying that?
That's possible. Thomas Sankara studied in Madagascar.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I really wasn't aware. But I am aware of the fact that there have been long-time relationships between Madagascar and Black Americans, going back at least to the late 19th century. You're probably familiar with the songwriter, Andy Ratzoff, R-A-Z-A-F.
Yes,
now, Ratzoff is actually
yes, sir.
an abbreviation of his Madagascar name. He has both Madagascar and Black American roots and became a very celebrated songwriter. I'm sure you know about some of his songs.
You talking about Fats Waller?
Well, yeah, he wrote songs recorded by France.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
But Ain't Misbehaving, of course, is one. Honeysuckle Rose is another. He actually died in Los Angeles in 1973.
Mm-hmm.
Born Andrea Paul Razakirlefo in Washington, D.C., the son of a Madagascar nobleman, and somehow Black American roots filtered into his bloodline. And of course, he wrote Stomping at the Savoy, Black and Blue. What did I do to be so black and blue?
That was made famous by Satchmo, right?
Sorry?
That was made famous by Satchmo, Louis Armstrong.
Of course. And there have been some books written about him, but there needs to be more. And I would also encourage any young scholars in the audience to really tackle that 1947 massacre in Madagascar.
There hasn't been I thought that was I'm getting all mixed up. I thought Ayuko Babu had talked about somebody writing or working on something on that. Or maybe I'm thinking about, there's been so many massacres of African and colonial people. You can't even, I can't even keep up.
Well, I'm not familiar with what Babu was referring to.
Well, I shouldn't have even raised it because I should be talking to you. I should know by now to not come on the air half baked. So I apologize to the listenership. I have one more question, then I'll turn it over to Melinda. The death of the former head of state of Kenya. How do I pronounce his name?
Mwai Kibaki, Emilio Mwai Kibaki, dies at 90. Third Kenyan president. Was rather wealthy, interestingly enough. A former economist, a former university professor, lecturer. He will be missed.
Was he Kikuyu or Luo? Or neither?
That I
or
don't
neither?
Know. That I don't know. Let me try to figure that out.
Well, wasn't he responsible for, wasn't there relatively quite a length of time where you had peace between the ethnic groups under his leadership?
Oh yeah, it was murderous. He was actually Kikuyu.
Okay.
And of course, part of the conflict historically in Kenya, at least since independence in 1963, has been who shall rule at home, ethnically. And that led to conflict. As a matter of fact, I recall when Barack Obama was elected in the United States, it helped to validate an old Kenyan joke, which is that you'd have a Luo president of the United States before Kenya. Of course, Mr. Obama is of Luo descent.
Right. I think, what's his name was Luo. One of our Ogingo Odinga was Luo, I believe.
I believe so.
He was.
I think that's one of the problems.
He was. He was a great African Kenyan leader who also had ties with Africans in America and Africans. I shouldn't say Africans in America. Africans in all around the world. Am I correct in saying that?
Oh, sure. And he's made up with the Uhuru Kenyatta. And with the next Kenyan elections approaching soon, Mr. Odinga might very well prevail because Mr. Kenyatta has thrown overboard his comrade, William Ruto, which many, including Ruto, have been shocked and surprised by. And when you see a deal like that happen, when Odinga and Kenyatta, who we had thought were antagonists, decide to join hands, there's something else up, although I can't tell you what it is.
You're listening to Diasporic Music on Black Power 96 with Melinda Francis, on the line with Dr. Gerald Horne. You have the next question, Melinda?
Yeah, so we want to get into the Solomon Islands and what's kind of stirring up hysteria around them.
Well, if you look at pictures of the Solomon Islands, you will see that these are melanin-rich people. Oftentimes they're referred to as Melanesian. The Solomon Islands is off the northeastern coast of Australia, and the Australians and their paymasters in Washington are quite upset because the Solomon Islands is growing closer to China, and that is not something you're supposed to do. Now, what's interesting, of course, is that out of one side of their mouth, the Australians and the Yankees are clamoring about self-determination for the Ukraine. Out of the other side of the mouth, they're complaining about self-determination of the Solomon Islands. Now, of course, by this point, we're accustomed to their hypocrisy. That's not a shock, nor is it a surprise. But in any case, it would not surprise me at all if there's an attempt at regime change, because they're that upset. Now, listeners who are familiar with history may recall that one of the major battles of the Pacific War, World War II, in the 1940s was fought in the Solomon Islands, Guadalcanal to be specific. And so the division of labor for what used to be called the white commonwealths, or the white dominions. Canada was oftentimes grouped in that ignominious category with Australia and New Zealand during the days of the Empire, British Empire, is that the Australians handled the Melanesians, the New Zealanders handled the Polynesians. Interestingly enough, since the Australians are to the right, I always found it curious that they were handled the portfolio to deal with the darkest of us all. And by the way, the Pan-African world has not done a good job of incorporating the Solomon Islands and the Melanesians into the larger Black community. And if I may say so, one of the few attempts that was made in that direction was the book I wrote about, 15 years ago. The White Pacific, U.S. Imperialism and Black Slavery in the South Seas after the Civil War. Because basically, after the United States was forced to abolish slavery, just like Keith Sweat, some of these slave owners said, make it last forever. So they moved en masse to the South Seas and tried to enslave Melanesians and Polynesians. And as I tell the story, the independent kingdom of Hawaii was objecting, and they wound up being overthrown by the Yankees in the 1890s. And there you have it.
I remember Dr. John Hendrick Clark. I've heard him speak many times, and he